I recently went to a antique showing of some quilts, and this quilt is called the Prairie Rose quilt, and it was made around 1850 by the Rayburn family. It is made from muslin and some fashion fabrics. Back in the day, quilts were made of scraps, so since this quilt was made with only three different fabrics, that showed wealth. It is quilted and padded in the trumpetto style, where the quilt maker adds further dimension to the top in the layering of the design of the quilting by raising a section using stuffing between the stitching on the top and middle layers. These leaves make the quilt appear to be a typical block pattern quilt. However, the leaves are actually the border of a faux block, as each quilt piece is shaped organically around the main flower pattern. The red fabric for the flowers was created through a Middle Eastern dyeing process that makes a color known as turkey red. The quality of this quilt and the care shown to it almost 2 centuries demonstrates its importance to the family that created it. Now, just gaze upon all of that quilting. Isn't it amazing? It's all hand done. Needle turn, applique. My hat's off to the ladies who would just not have air conditioning, cook 3 meals a day, clean till their hands bleed, and be able to still create this in their spare time. This quilt is called a sunrise pattern, and it was made by Barbara Torrin Carson in 1846. The circles, diamonds, and triangles come together to create a decorative sun pattern around stitch flower shape in the center of the sun. Hand-woven cotton supports the quilt pattern created by Barbara Torrin Carson in 1946 from material taken from her son George Wilson Carson's baby dress. I wonder how that was known, unless it was documented in a diary. But this is actually part of a historical society that has this quilt, and I'm just in awe that this quilt has survived this many years. This quilt was called Star and Flowers, and it's by Mary Porter Root, 1940. Now, if you look at this quilt, you're gonna see, and you can't really tell up close, but there is actually fabric missing. So the light aspect in the star, kind of the neutral look, that's actually the cotton showing through. So whatever fabric was used in that portion all disintegrated at the same time, which gives a clue that there was probably an iron oxide dye that was used in that fabric, and it totally eroded away. Now, just think about all the hard work that went into this. The people that actually picked the cotton in the fields, then they had to get it to the mill, and then all the hard-working people at the mill to create the thread, and then the thread and the hard-working people would loom the cotton, and then it would come and it would ultimately turn into a quilt. This quilt is very vibrant. It says it was made in 1840, but that quilt is so vibrant, I really find it hard to believe that it was made in 1840. Isn't it just amazing? I know in my quilting adventures that I inherited some of my grandmother's fabric, and when I would iron it to put it into the quilt, you could smell the actual iron oxide dye. It's a smell that you don't forget. When I would iron the red fabrics, you could smell the berries in the dye. I don't know how old those fabrics were, but pretty much quilts quilt fabrics and fabrics in general since about 1950 have been made with a more synthetic process, and so the previous dyes, the natural dyes, would have ran and bled and created all sorts of problems if you didn't pre-wash your fabric. Nowadays it still happens, but it's not as common. I love the fact that this is such an old quilt, and I like that they cut out these flower motifs, and I didn't really pay close attention when I snapped this photo. I don't know if those were applique on or if it was a border fabric of some kind. I suspect that maybe they fussy cut some fabric. I just am in awe of these old quilts. And here's another example of an old quilt that it's ripped, and if you notice, the pink dye in the fabrics have totally eroded away some of the fabric. It's pretty good where it's quilted, but it's shown a lot of wear, whereas the blue has not shown any. So the indigo dye might be less caustic or less have less oxidizing factors than the reds. And I don't know, you know, maybe the berries that were used to make that, and we don't know what color that originally was. It could have been a true red and then over time just totally faded to this mauve color. But I suspect, you know, if you're using berries, if you don't put lemon juice over them, they oxidize and they turn brown. And that might be exactly what happened with this quilt. And these things today, in modern day, we like to take our long arms and quilt things to death. Can you imagine doing that with a needle and thread? These things are quilted to the max. Usually hand quilting, you know, you might have an inch gap in between maybe a grid of lattice work quilting or maybe some Baptist fans that have about an inch or maybe an inch and a half between the concentric arches in the quilting. And this is just phenomenal that someone took the time, and I wonder how many hours is in this. I mean, the sewing machine was not an invention until 1880-ish. Well, it might have been 1850. I would like to know if these quilts are hand pieced or if they're machine pieced, and they wouldn't let you touch them, so we'll never know. But wouldn't it be neat to know that information? Some of these were just totally hand done. I know they were. But it makes you, the curiosities in these just make you wonder.